Hello, everyone. We are on our weekly writers meeting with Dr. Michael Laitman. Hello, Dr. Laitman. Hello, everyone. Dudi. And we would like to open our show with big headlines. We'd like to ask about the day after capitalism. Ronen, please. Good morning. Recently, there was an article published about life after capitalism. I prepared a short summary of the article so that you and our viewers will understand what are we talking about, and then we prepared several questions. If you'd like to stop me midway and say anything, gladly. So, first of all, the article is talking about the day after capitalism. The corona crisis really accelerated the process. There are many courses that are dealing with the world after capitalism, but corona undoubtedly promoted the process. According to the team, it is necessary to think not only about local solutions, but also about the principles from a profit-based society to a need-based society, meaning that we have to reinvent our universal existence. The system as is forcing a useless life upon us, capitalism as an unsustainable system. Also, there is a kind of a weakness, intellectual and political, in terms of offering alternatives to the current system, so much so that it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism itself. The crisis sharpened our understanding that the country the state has to and can take care of the well-being of its citizens, and we have to offer some kind of post-capitalistic system, gradual guidance to a more purposeful, meaningful life. How do we make the shift? And the main thing won't be making money or earning a profit, but freedom. They also criticize the ecologists, saying that this approach is a very limited one, that it doesn't have a true vision, but they're only shouting about change this, change that, but they don't really have a solution. And now the governments and the banks that bailed out all the elites, they missed out on the goal because they didn't condition the bailout on a more equal world and so on. Now, 4 recommendations. First of all, would you like to say something? And then I'll give you the recommendations. Dr. Laitman, let's continue. Ronen, the first recommendation is in order for the elites to be bailed out, they have to put aside money for making society a better place. The second one is cooperatives that will allow us, businesses, people, to release us from our dependence on banks and work more in the form of cooperatives in this field. Third recommendation, universal basic income. For example, in Israel, they say that it's possible to do it based on the minimum wage of 5,300 shekels per person. They think maybe by being able to realize this by putting taxes, additional taxes on the wealthiest and so on, and also to introduce more cooperative models instead of competitive ones. Dr. Laitman, I have many questions. I don't know if this is the place to ask, but who am I turning with these questions to? To write these kinds of sentences, You can write dozens and dozens more, but what's the use? Ronen, so the first question we'd like to ask is, do you see being engaged or asking these questions as the right thing to do? Dr. Laitman, it is good to be engaged in anything that has to do with the future in order to learn from it, in order to sort, see, leave for serious discussion those things that are truly relevant and that can meet our intellectual scrutiny. Ronen, the corona crisis really accelerated current processes, exposing weaknesses in the capitalistic system. Do you see a future to capitalism? Dr. Laitman, of course, capitalism has no future. In my opinion, we are in the last crisis, only that it can last for many more years. But this is the last crisis. There's no more capitalism even, because there's no connection between what man does, how much he makes, earns, and so on. This entire chain does not exist. It's all like patch over patch. And it's not capitalism. Healthy capitalism is a society that ticks and tacks correctly according to our ego in a good and nice way. Not good and nice in terms of it in and of itself being that way, but that it functions that way. And that you can calculate and make plans. From the moment they started making notes out of money, that was that. It finished everything. Ronen, it sounds like were we not to shift to the distorted form of capitalism, but would we remain in the way it was in the 60s and 70s, you'd support it. Dr. Laitman, I wouldn't support it forever. That's for sure. But as a certain period in history, capitalism did its work. And it worked correctly. It developed humanity. This is how we always develop in everything. We go in, develop our will to receive, our ego, our relationships, our attitude toward each other, until we see that what we've built isn't good, and we go forward. So now we reached a state where we broke capitalism a long time ago, but we made it such a distorted regime method that we no longer know how to make anything out of it. Money isn't money, power isn't power, regime isn't regime. Wherever you have government, you have crony capitalism. The problem is that actually there is no field in our life where that we're not destroying, really. Everything's destroyed. Nature, relations in the family, between people, man himself, and so on and so forth. Meaning our ego has grown so much so that it entered all of our businesses, all of our relations, the still vegetative, animate between people. Our ego came in such a way that it does only what is good for it, and as a result of this completely false attitude, it's also not afraid of the lie, our ego, and it has already reached a final state. Dudi, when did capitalism end? At what point in history? It ended and we should have shifted to another phase, and this is where the distortion began. Dr. Laitman, I think that it's a gradual process that started around maybe where we left the correlation between money and gold, the gold money equivalent. I don't research these things. I'm not in the stock markets. These things aren't important to me. But once regime was traded for power and there was crony capitalism started, Ronen, researchers talk about bankruptcy, that it started with Margaret Thatcher, from a capitalism that worked for everyone to a capitalism that started working only for the elites. Now, capitalism has a self-destruction mechanism, Dr. Laitman, of course, because we're in a system that is the system of nature, and unless we keep these laws, then what happens is that a destructive process begins. There was a period during which capitalism was a good thing. There was a period where slavery was also a good thing. People wanted to be slaves because they'll have what to eat, a place to sleep, they'll have some kind of they'll be covered by their boss because he'll protect them and so on. So they wanted to be slaves. And this is how it is with every regime. It starts with people being drawn to this. After slavery, after feudalism, after all the years of the plagues in Europe and so on, the Middle Ages, this was really a beacon of light for humanity. And therefore I think that these things, they're clear. Whereas now, where capitalism is the last stage in the egoistic development of humanity, it already starts taking on, and this started a long time ago, in the 70s or even before, it started taking on such distortional forms that it's consuming itself, losing any connection between work and fertility and money and all these things, and therefore it's no longer capitalism. It's simply a forceful regime. Only in Russia, the forceful regime, it's by the power of the fist, and here it's by the power of control, meaning ownership, banks, money, and so on. But it's the same. There are many similarities between them. Final question, specifically about this, says Ronen. I think that the capitalistic method is most natural for a person, suits man's ego best. Dr. Laitman, that's true. If we follow it and realize it precisely according to the laws of capitalism, in terms of work, profit, and so on. But the problem is that once, as a person, you start getting power, you become powerful, then the distortion begins. You no longer keep the correct attitude, the correct relation between quantity and quality and work, exertions, money, reward, and you twist things in such a way that it's no longer capitalism. It's a kind of feudalism or something, meaning there is a kind of regression to... The main thing is to be in power. If I'm related to someone who's in power in government, if I'm in power, then that's it. It's like in the past being a part of royalty. Avio, I wanted to ask two questions. Being engaged and looking for alternatives for capitalism, as Ronen said, this came out of distress, out of the severe economic situation. Do you think that it's good to be engaged in that while we're still disconnected from the educational part of things? Could it bear new ideas, helplessness maybe? How do you see this? Dr. Laitman, I don't understand the question. Avio, the article that Ronen started out with, researchers wrote it about looking an alternative for the capitalistic reality because we see that it no longer works. When you're talking about alternative, you're talking about something much broader that includes an educational process. Dr. Laitman, how are you going to make a change without educating the people, the world even? How will you make a change? You want to make a change in direction of what? Avio, right now people are looking for a way to, set things straight. Nothing's working. Let's look for an alternative. Dr. Laitman, according to what formula do you divide money, people, work, labor? There has to be some kind of formula. What is it? It has to be connected in a formula. Avio, so when we see these kinds of researches, it is similar to the things that you're talking about in terms of the problems about it, of course without the spiritual element, but when we're moving to the solutions, they're always technical, or that they're pretty similar to the previous method, but if in the past there were fewer people with a lot and more people with less, let's start redividing these things, the government will intervene, and so on. Going back to processes like communism, socialism, without the educational process that you're talking about, do you see a point in this kind of discussion? Or first of all, we have to talk about the educational part of things and only then the economical solution? First of all, I'm in favor of all kinds of discussions as long as they're on the level of discussions and not that people take to the streets and immediately groups that have interests are starting to protest and buying the media. This is a problem. It's a problem in all of these discussions. But in principle, it's a good thing to have a social discussion about this. I think that besides the wisdom of Kabbalah, I have nothing else to offer to humanity. And up ahead, I don't see anything good coming out as a result of all of this. I think that nonetheless, we might deteriorate to a world war. I don't think that human ego realistically, gradually, cautiously, that you can invert it upside down and to use it correctly. It's only on condition that we're really, first of all, make a thorough calculation and someplace in the world we set an example for it to all of mankind. Avio, but the ego is rational. Eventually it wants to survive. The combination between distress and the inability to advance, plus some kind of rational explanation, could it decrease the need for disasters? I never saw such an example in the past. I think I thoroughly understand what you're talking about, but it doesn't seem to me that man can agree to giving everything up but only if he has no choice, really, in a way that you have no choice. To bring humanity to this kind of situation, to this state, I think that on the way, there are many options of plunging into wars and such problems that, look at what's happening. The coronavirus. The moment all of these problems began, nothing in humanity grew besides the billions of dollars that were immediately invested in arms and countries arming themselves in weapons. Not in education, not in culture, not in how to allow people to survive, but billions of dollars were immediately invested in war machines in that direction. Ronen, going back a moment to the recommendations of that team, there are two genres about capitalism. Many say that it's possible to correct it, to go 30, 40 years back to how it was at its peak. And others say, look, we need an alternative. And what we read are the recommendations. A national wealth fund for everyone, things like that. So what do we say? We can't go back to how things were, or Dr. Laitman, first of all, can you turn to the rich and say, give up 90% of what you have? It's done, but they're deaf. Yeah, done. You can do whatever you want. It's like standing on a street corner with a violin or something and playing something there. Who's going to look at you? Who's going to share and give unless you come to him with a gun? There's nothing to talk about, no one to talk to. They have an army, they have the regime in their hands, they have the laws, the way they've twisted and turned them in whatever way they wanted to. They have lawyers, they have the police, they have everything. How do you want to fight them? And they'll keep their property, they'll protect it, they won't give you anything. Unless it will happen in such a way that it will be in order to calm things down a bit and that people will say how good they are. Ronen, and why should they listen to the solution that the wisdom of Kabbalah has to offer? It sounds the same, something that they can't stand. Dr. Laitman, what do you mean? Ronen, the solution that you're offering, if you turn to them, they wouldn't listen anyway. Dr. Laitman, I'm talking about the act of dissemination and education. That then the entire nation, and it's 90%. It's 90% of the nation everywhere, starts understanding what's going on. They don't know, they don't understand. But again, it's a big problem. Still, we have to come closer to them. And because today, one way or another, the media, not all of it, is in the hands of those that serve crony capitalism, then we can do something. And we see that the entire economic, political institution is engaged in preserving the current economic order at any price. Dr. Laitman, of course, what's the question? Ronen, and this crisis, which is unprecedented, didn't change anything. Dr. Laitman, of course. Ronen, so at this critical junction, what do we have to do? That's why I'm saying that I don't see any possibility of advancing in the direction of a solution, but broad education where we simply explain the kind of world that we're living in, what is our ego. Like Bala Sulam writes, in all the processes that we have gone through, and what do we have to do, that we have no choice, without punishing anyone, harming anyone, but simply scientifically explaining to everyone what's going on. The kind of problem that humanity is in on the one hand, and on the other hand, the beautiful state we can be in if we correctly relate to each other, our abilities, the times that we're in. Chaim, previously you said that we are under forceful regime, not by the power of the fist, but Dr. Laitman, it's even worse, because military power, this is clear, and the other kinds of forces that are controlling us aren't really seen. Ronen, while the power is in the hands of the elites, what do? Dr. Laitman, but in the meantime, the nation, the people, the public, without understanding the crony capitalism or the tie between the elites and the regime, they start understanding what's going on with them, what's going on in general. The public starts understanding that there's no solution in this kind of, in the way things are and who's arranging their life. Chaim, okay, they understand it, and what then? Dr. Laitman, then you can force the public, one way or another, to reach a state where it will change its attitude toward the crony capitalism, that they will demand for themselves more and more force, power to determine life. Chaim, and if the public demands it, but the power is in the hands of crony capitalism, Dr. Laitman, they'll have no choice. They'll have to share these things with the public one way or another. Chaim, because the public will demand it? Dr. Laitman, yes? Yeah? Chaim, so what does it mean that they have the power in their hands? Dr. Laitman, if the public exactly knows what ways are we developing in, what direction are we going in, then for sure the public already has a basis of who to turn to, what to demand, and what way do we want to live our life? What is the solution? This is on the one hand. On the other hand, take the entire process that we're going through under the forces of nature. We're changing too. We, people, we're changing. We came out of capitalism. You can say, no, we're still in pursuit of rags and different luxuries, cars, whatever. No, it's still in decline. And no matter how much you hear about how much people want to wake these things up, stimulate them, all in all, it's disappearing. The ego has exhausted itself in that way. A generation that was living only in order to profit and buy, that's gone. Book a flight, you see that people won't fly like they did before. Look at the flight charts. We're beyond that. We've passed that. It gave us a blow to the head and okay, we stopped. What is there about it? And it's good to go on vacation here and there. It's fine, but not that way. Meaning communication also does its work. It's not just one force acting vis-a-vis to the other force, opposite the other force. It's a spectrum of forces. And therefore I'm certain that only by education that changes everything about a person. Priorities, values, it can change the face of the world. Chaim, and then there will be a situation where with the help of education there will be that there will be a different society that will be built against the desire of those in power? Dr. Laitman, I think so. Because all in all, how are they powerful? Because we're dependent on them. We give them our power. But once we need things only in order to survive, live our life on a standard normal level, not to buy all these things that they want to feed us with, all of these toys, then they're no longer in power and control of us. Try to see what every government's doing now. It's losing its power of influence over its citizens. Chaim, so their power over us is bread and amusement, so to speak? Dr. Laitman, yes, but it'll be hard for them to buy the public with bread and amusements. Chaim, so when the public doesn't want that, they relieve themselves of it. Dr. Laitman, yeah, I don't want to even talk about it. It's trivial things that this is going to happen. In the near future, we'll no longer see that there will be anything to buy the public by. The public will be, both because of the different problems and everything, the public will be wise enough in order not to buy all of these things. And also governments and crony capitalism, they won't have enough power in order to twist the people all the time. They won't. And that they started handing out money here and there to this and to that just so, it won't hold. I also don't have the exact words for it right now. Can broad explanation bring a change without a world war, an economic change? Dr. Laitman, I hope that education, not only broadly explaining these things, but education that you give everyone precisely, systematically, an explanation of who are we, what are we, where did it come from, how did we develop throughout history, what is the ego that it is at the base of human nature and the world, and so on. By that, you actually bring them to a clear conclusion that you have no choice but to change human nature, and it is possible to do if we get organized in a new society. How long does such an educational process take? Generation, 2, 3? Dr. Laitman, I think it can be arranged in several years, because it's a mass of people that can really be connected to this all around the world. We are undergoing a global blow, a global calamity. You understand that what's going on now never happened before. It's all around the world. It's not letting go. It's not leaving. It's not that we're all dreaming that in a few months it'll all end, and that we're already making some kind of plans. It won't come to an end, and there will be no such plans. And in the meantime, people, if at all, change according to their character, according to their inclinations. They won't want to fly. They won't want to do all those things that they did before. It's all disappearing. It's a paradox. It's a wonder, but this is what's going on. This is what's happening, and how will you then control everyone? Dudi, who will give such a kind of education if it contradicts the interests of governments and the elites? Dr. Laitman, I think that there will be many smart people in the world that will try to publicize these things and to publish them, to publicize them, and of course we will too. Dudi, will it not collide with the desire of the elites? Dr. Laitman, yeah, and Dudi, so how will it spread? Who do you mean by smart people? People that study Kabbalah or intellectuals? Who are they? Dr. Laitman, intellectuals, they too, I don't want to say, but in such a conclusive way, but in such a comprehensive way, but many of them are willing to sell themselves out. No problem. It's like those that are fighting for the sake of clean air and the ozone layer and vegetation and let animals survive and things like that. It all depends on what do you buy them with. But still, there are many people that will be able to talk. And the main thing, again, it's not a matter of scientists or philosophers or where they are. Sure, there will be some kind of struggle and we'll witness it. But the thing is that you have no choice. You have no choice. You are in a state where finally, you have to open the cards. It's the law of nature. These are laws that humanity is developing according to. I can't explain this maybe in any better way, more clearly, but it's like any regime, let's say, that comes and goes and comes and replaces the previous one. So this is also how it works here. Nature does the work. What anyone wanted for there to be corona, for these kinds of things to happen, doesn't it harm all the elites and all the governments? And it doesn't matter how many more billions they write down. What are they going to do with these billions? Dudi, who is this next layer of people that will understand these messages? I'm not talking about your students around the world. Who's next in line that can grasp these messages and disseminate them onwards? Those that feel bad. Those that feel bad, as simple as that. And again, the solution has to come through the ego. You're saying not the rich, says Dudi, not scientists, not academics, not the government. So I don't understand. Who are those that feel bad? Dr. Laitman, those that feel that life's bad in different ways, starting with nothing to eat and up to the point where there's no solution to life, the meaning of life. That they feel no sense of future, that they don't understand how to resolve the problems of the world. Today, I don't have the words to express myself. Dudi, it doesn't necessarily mean that if they feel bad that they can build these systems. It's tremendous infrastructure what you're talking about. Dr. Laitman, of course, and Dudi, but you're talking about people that will pass it on. Dr. Laitman, I'm not talking about tremendous infrastructures because there's just one tiny, very narrow principle here, which is man's ego that looks at everything through its narrow eye, and this is how it builds all of its infrastructure, and based on this one principle. And if you take out this one principle, everything collapses like during the corona pandemic. Dudi, do you see some kind of council of the wise that doesn't consist of Kabbalah students, some kind of council that will lead these things? like a World Wisdom Council kind of thing? Dr. Laitman, I'll tell you, it's possible that there are many people that are close to us in terms of the need for change, and that the change has to happen in society, but they will not agree that there is need to change the ego, that there is need to really see that human nature has to be changed, because they're not connected to the upper forces of nature from where the changes will come. So how exactly will the correction begin? Because it's just a change. Dr. Laitman, the change has to be only through the dissemination of the method of the wisdom of Kabbalah. And even though that it doesn't seem that this is how it's going to work, but it's actually going to work only that way. You're actually asking me, how could it be that the entire world will suddenly accept this method and will want to use it and everything's going to be fine? Things won't be fine. There will be struggles, scrutinies. It's going to be not simple. These are unsimple times. The time of, it's called the times of the Messiah. And Kabbalists say we wouldn't want to live in that period. Guy, to continue what Dudi asked, practically, how is this change going to happen? We're saying that the change will come from below, from the simple people, from the public that are discontent. On other talks, we're saying that the public itself can't lead a change, that it has to come from the decision makers. Meaning, to continue Dudi's question practically wise, what is the trigger that will suddenly cause people to use other content, different content, or for this to be able to spread this idea? Dr. Laitman, I don't see these forces right now. I don't think that a government can take such decisions. Possibly, it'll happen in Israel, actually, because here there is a different relation between crony capitalism and the public, and maybe here it can happen differently than in other countries. I don't know. I'll keep asking. Guy, so if I understand correctly, right now it's not clear yet, will the change come from above or from below? Dr. Laitman, it seems to me that from here and from there, because all in all, it depends on the people that are in both. In Israel, it's a problem. The connection between these levels of the masses, the general public, and the regime, well, the elites, that's something else, but between the public and the regime, the connection is pretty clear, pretty close. Guy, in Israel, for example, since September, because of the corona, people their mortgage payments were postponed, and that will end on September, and people will have to start paying back their mortgage. Along with it, there's unemployment that's on the rise, and there are many people that even if you I don't know what you do, they won't be able to pay back their mortgage. Dr. Laitman, so they won't? Guy, so there is like a kind of a deadline for a possible economic chaos. By the way, in the United States, it is already happening. The government postponed it, and I think that It ended at midnight yesterday, and people are being evacuated from their homes, simply pushed out of their homes, evicted. So, Dr. Laitman, I have nothing to say. That's why I said that here the connection between those at the top and those at the bottom here in Israel is different than in any other place in the world. In Russia, between them, there's the KGB, a strong regime, and so on. In the United States, you have laws that are very strict, that replace the regime. Here, as if everything's happening inside one home. And therefore, here, it could actually be different than in any other place in the world, and to set a kind of an example for others. Guy, the chances that people will be thrown out of their homes to the street, it's not the character of the country. It won't happen. So this will serve as an example to the world. Dr. Laitman, no, this is how it is among Jews. They won't take this as an example. That's how Jews are. No nation and no regime will take this as something that you can take an example from, because it's no, this is how Jews live their life, these are the relations between them. The world won't look at it. The question is, asks Guy, could it be something that will hold back the development of this process? 2 weeks ago, we talked to you, said that there's going to be chaos here, otherwise there will be no change unless a country feels bad. Dr. Laitman, it'll feel bad without that too. It's not the matter of mortgages. It's not about mortgages. That half of the people will not have work, that half of the shops won't function, go back to functioning like they used to. It'll reorganize things. Avio, in Israel, we also remember hard economic times, like in the 50s. And all in all, at its foundation, Israel was a socialistic country, meaning there's a different attitude between people here and so on. Could this make things easier? This country wasn't born with the American dream. Dr. Laitman, not only the country, this nation was created out of connection, was based on connection. It's in our DNA, embedded in our DNA, and therefore it's not the same attitude as you have in the United States, where there the attitude, the relation between people is based on very direct, clear ego. Here it has to do with the nation itself. You're a Jew, I'm a Jew, it's something else. Avio, and the Holocaust, and we have many memories that go with this story. So you're saying that these seeds are embedded in people? They're only under a serious, they're covered with dirt. Dr. Laitman, therefore it's becoming a kind of a national, family-like problem that I don't know how the government's going to hold. I think that there are going to be very big problems here. Guy, like what? Dr. Laitman, that they'll want to bring the government down. In every government, you have more than half of the people that want to throw out the other half and, to be in power instead of them just for an hour of glory. Guy, but that's not a new problem because of the corona or anything. Dr. Laitman, you're right, but here you have a situation that has no solution. There's no solution for the national debt, for mortgages, no one's going to cover it. The Americans aren't going to cover it. The Democrats are going to come now, and from them you'll only see problems and terrible problems. All the Arabs are only waiting for it. Everyone's only waiting. When will there be elections there? The Democrats will come. They'll come to power because of our pretty Jews. and then you'll have a ball. Ronen, one of the things that I heard about is that this crisis undermines the control of the elites, which is, there are many ways. It's a very sophisticated kind of control. The way in which the elites are controlling the public is very sophisticated. It's through culture and doctrines and many other things. So it undermines their control. Now, there also has to be a central governing body, the country, so it's growing stronger. And also the elites, they became even richer. Dr. Laitman, look, I don't think that we are approaching a state where equity shows power. I don't think so. It's good in the day-to-day life, but in times of crisis, a strong crisis, equity, money won't play a role. Its power will be very thin. I don't know how to explain this, but let's put it this way. When there's war, then the rich and the poor all have a problem. Of course, there is a difference, but both are under pressure. Ronen, at the beginning of the crisis, you explained how unique this crisis is, that it hurts everyone, that it's global. But since then, we see how the weak were harmed more in terms of the labor market, mortgages, and every aspect. Also, the weaker populations they're more sick among the weaker populations. It hurts the weak more than the rich. Dr. Laitman, I don't know what you mean by percentage, maybe also in relative percentage, but how many rich do you have compared to the poor? So in numbers, you can't examine that. It's all relative. And what does it mean? What does it say? Ronen, I'm saying that if we thought that there's a global problem that everyone's experiencing or dealing with, and this will shake the elites up, we see that still the elites are only growing stronger. For them, things are fine, and others are suffering. Is this advancing us or keeping us back on our way to correction? Dr. Laitman, whatever happens is advancing us. First and foremost, it's advancing us. Another thing is that I think that in the upcoming months, we'll see how it really works in a more truthful, not in a completely truthful way, but more truthful way. And it seems to me that it won't help the elites having crony capitalism. It won't. Because all in all, you're not in a regime in which you can twist the public in whichever way you want through crony capitalism. You can't. It's no longer... We're no longer in the Middle Ages or someplace. And so it seems to me that we are facing very big problems. Mortgages, they'll have to swallow it, and all the rest of the things in Israel especially, that it has to do with the national state, with the situation with the neighbors. All in all, from our behavior, things are going to be very hard. Ronen, if I understand correctly, the reason for which the elites have less power over the public, it's because people are no longer open to the same temptations like bread and amusement by which they were controlled by. Do you see this crisis accelerating these inner changes in people? Dr. Laitman, undoubtedly. Norma is waiting to ask. Please. Should we be optimistic about anything? Because in the meantime, we're talking about an educational process, and there's a kind of gap between a long-term educational process and how things are in the field. Dr. Laitman, I'm asking you, do you want for it to pass smoothly bit by bit, or do you want for it to collapse and be rebuilt by a big crisis? What does it mean that the educational process is slow? You want for it to happen quickly, only with the help of bombs, that you break everything that you had before. So don't wait for things that can happen quickly from one day to the next. I don't think that's good. But actually, gradually, through education, where there's an explanation, where there's discussion, where there is what to do. We see it on ourselves, how much time we need in ups and downs and different forms in which we have to change, by which we have to change. What can you do? It's human nature. We're in a very unique state where nature is going through change. It never was this way before. It always developed in a more or less linear way, from a smaller to a bigger ego, taking on different forms. Social forms, familial forms. Political forms, the ego that was developing now for the very first time in history, that the ego has to replace the plus by the minus. It has to invert itself, so I don't think that humanity can do it in a leap, quickly. And it's not worth doing. It's a state in which very big problems can happen then. So you want to pressure all these things together into some nuclear bomb? I don't think that's good. Only through education, extended, gradual education. Oh, what do you mean lengthy? 10, 20, 30 years. But this is how it is. And gradually, humanity will start understanding what it has to do, because it has no choice, in a way that it agrees to it. Norma, until it'll happen, is it impossible to prevent things like we had the Arab Spring a few years ago, and for it to become like a worldwide autumn, that there won't be protests around the world again, because there's hunger already in several places in the world, including the United States, the most powerful country, as if. Yeah, I don't think that we can determine these kinds of things and prevent or not prevent the outbreak and collapses here and there. I don't think that it's possible, but only through dissemination. We have just one force. And this is also the only force that can do something here. Dudi. So you have to strengthen the nation, that there's a lengthy process. Dr. Laitman, change. This is what we need in our awareness and the awareness of the public. And this is what we have to do. And this is done through dissemination and working with the public. Because a person that will hear this talk might plunge into despair, because extended processes, I'm talking about a small person that doesn't see the picture. Where does the power where can a person take the strength to be persistent about this besides the pain that he feels? Dr. Laitman, that there's a group of people that is researching and investigating these things and that are trying to realize the method of correction. Who do we have to lean on? Only our Father in the heavens. That's it. We are in a state in which humanity will start to open itself up, and there's no way to get support for this from nothing. Suddenly, we deviated from the rational approach to help from the heavens. Dr. Laitman, no, the heavens here are the forces of nature that we have to understand and know how to correctly use in order to change ourselves. In the world, there are two forces, as if positive and negative, and we have to rationally use them. And it's equal for everyone, for all of humanity, for all nations, for everyone. What do you mean we have no one to lean on? Dr. Laitman, there's just one law, the law of nature, that now we have our ego that's controlled as if by the evil force, and we have to make room in us, among people, in human society, for the force of good, and to draw it by learning how to connect, how to come together, how to join each other. And this way, the force of good will start gradually working, and not taking as if an example from how things were yesterday, or take other examples from Russia, from different socialistic revolutions, because it's a completely different time. We have to explain all of these things. Dudi, you said that Israel will be an example for humanity. How exactly? Dr. Laitman, in the way that it realizes the method. In the way that it realizes the method. Why don't you see this happening this way? So you start using what you have, and you'll see how the entire world, especially in a state of helplessness, will look at you, will hear what you have to say, because subconsciously, everyone appreciates you. Everyone feels that if you have something, it's good to learn from you. Also, in terms of the economic method and everything, will be an example for humanity. Due to the social change, everything else will come. In this educational process that you're talking about, 20, 30 years, we're going into a process. Dr. Laitman, I'm not saying that this is from one day to the next. How is that possible? From one day to the next to do this? It's impossible. Because the entire change is a change in man's awareness, and the relation between people, the measure to which they're in struggles, examining themselves, that it is possible or impossible one way or another. And this is how they reach gradual decisions that maybe to do something here, a bit there, through children's education. Okay, obviously, this is a lengthy process, not from one day to the next, but at what point in time will people start seeing a change? Will say, okay, this is good for us. Dr. Laitman, once you start explaining to everyone that they have no choice and that this is the only way, because we're going to change nature itself. We are going to change nature. That this is the entire foundation of the bad, the evil that we feel, and we have no choice. And the corona will help us in that. And just wait and see what will happen, how much human evil will be revealed. And if we don't correct that, then that's the end. Therefore, they will understand. And if they don't, then you know what it says. That, as it says, that merciful mothers cook their children. These are very severe states. Therefore, don't complain about it being long or immediate or simple, that everyone understands and agrees, but a process is a process. Avihu, I want to ask something about the process. Dudi, we're sorry because we're taking up the time of the New Life team. They're supposed to be on now. Go ahead, ask. Avihu, about the educational process. Try to go with us. We see groups of people that we said that aren't characterized in a specific way, that gradually grow wiser. On the one hand, they're suffering because reality is unpleasant, not good, there are problems, and so on. On the other hand, we, in different forms and ways, let's not go into specifics, but similar to the process that we're going through, we take them through the same kind of process. On the one hand, giving them knowledge. On the other hand, they themselves start going through a process, which is a kind of an educational process of communities and so on. Dr. Laitman, who exactly are you talking about? Avihu, about the public. Dr. Laitman, not scientists. Avihu, no, not at all. I understood from you that it's not necessary for them to be one way or another. The general public that's suffering and is looking for an alternative or starting to learn about nature to understand their problem. And what happens then? They're not starting to make changes. Simply something changes on the inside, and as a result, public opinion is starting to form. Dr. Laitman, yes, I think that by changing their social relations, also their opinion starts changing, and their character and their attitude, and they get a deeper understanding about the laws of nature, and this way they can advance toward a general understanding of what to do with themselves and everything. I'm afraid of one thing, says Dr. Laitman, not about the general public, the masses. I'm afraid of different scientists and philosophers that might convince the government and the media with their blah, blah, blah. And by that, they can take them in different such directions that it will cost all of us dearly. This is what I'm afraid of. Avihu, like what happened now, with different smart Alex jumping with their brilliant ideas, and were we to follow them, we'd be in a very bad situation. Dr. Laitman, what are you talking about? Avihu, about the plague. Dr. Laitman, yeah, but here we're not talking about the corona, but about the solution. About the solution for the nation, for society, for the country. Avihu, social solutions. Dr. Laitman, yes. So I think that all those with an inclination towards socialism, maybe, or other things that can confuse with their academic degrees and that they're known and they're close to the public and this and that, it seems to me that here they can corrupt many things. Another small question, says Avihu, the public that's changing, the change itself, by the masses starting to change, Dr. Laitman, because they understand this is the change. You don't need anything besides that. From that, new orders will come and will clothe on the public of you. So what happens to happen? What has to happen? The first stage is a change in awareness. It's not that someone has to do anything, but to start changing internally and then start changing his relations with others. Dr. Laitman, that's all we need. Everything else will be done from above. Norma. If so, it means that every smallest step in the awareness of the public will be expressed in society. Dr. Laitman, yes. Norma, it won't be the solution yet, but they'll become an integral part of the process. Dr. Laitman, true. Good. Dudi, thank you very much. Dr. Laitman, I'm sorry I suddenly felt that I lack many words, but let's scrutinize these things, cook them a bit. I'm willing to have more such talks. You want to have it in the afternoon? Fine, no problem. Whatever is convenient to you. Dudi, we have to talk about the entire educational process, and there are many more questions coming. Dr. Laitman, no problem. We can have it in the afternoon too. Dudi, we'll prepare ourselves. This Friday we have another meeting. Whoever has questions is invited to send it to me. Friday, 10:30, live. We also need the time to process these things ourselves. Dr. Laitman, fine. Dudi, Dr. Laitman, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Laitman, thank you. All the best.